The year was 1955. The Cold War was gripping the entire planet. But in a small, jungle-covered country in Southeast Asia, a different kind of war was already beginning to burn. A war that would shatter a nation, divide a superpower, and cost over 3 million lives. A war that would end in something almost nobody believed was possible: a United States defeat. How did it happen? How did the most powerful military on Earth lose a war fought in the jungles of Vietnam? Stay with me, because this is one of the most dramatic stories in modern history.
To understand the Vietnam War, we have to understand what Vietnam had been living through for centuries: foreign domination. Long before the war, Vietnam had spent over 1,000 years under Chinese rule. It fought back, it gained independence, and then it fought again. By the mid-1800s, a new colonial power arrived: France. In 1858, Napoleon III ordered the invasion of Vietnam. By 1862, France had captured Saigon and forced the Vietnamese emperor to hand over the southern territories. Within decades, France had swallowed all of Vietnam, plus its neighbors, Laos and Cambodia, bundling them into what they called French Indochina. The Vietnamese suffered. Farmers were forced to grow rice for French trade while paying crushing taxes and losing their land. Revolts broke out, and every time, France crushed them. Until one man changed everything. That man was Ho Chi Minh. Born under French rule, Ho Chi Minh grew up watching his people suffer. He was expelled from school for speaking against colonialism. He traveled the world, lived in Paris, and when World War I ended, he showed up at the Versailles Peace Conference with a petition demanding rights for the Vietnamese. He was completely ignored by France and by U.S. President Woodrow Wilson alike. That moment radicalized him. He turned to communism, returned home, and in 1930 founded the Indochinese Communist Party. His goal was simple and absolute: a free, united, independent Vietnam.
When World War II began, France was distracted. Japan invaded Vietnam and took control. Ho Chi Minh saw his opportunity. He formed the Viet Minh, a coalition of communists and nationalists united by one cause: driving out foreign rule. Using lightning-fast guerrilla tactics led by his brilliant general, Vo Nguyen Giap, the Viet Minh fought the Japanese. When Japan collapsed at the end of World War II in 1945, Ho Chi Minh stood in Hanoi before a massive crowd and declared Vietnam's independence. France refused to accept it. They returned with 190,000 soldiers, tanks, and air support, determined to reclaim their colony. The Viet Minh were outnumbered and outgunned. Only about 50,000 fighters, most of them farmers who had never trained as soldiers. But General Giap had a strategy: never fight France head-on. Ambush, disappear, hit supply lines, wear them down. For years, this worked. Then in 1954 came the battle that ended it all: Dien Bien Phu. The French had built a fortress in a remote valley near the Laos border, certain their air power and firepower would crush any Viet Minh attack. They were catastrophically wrong. General Giap moved 40,000 troops to surround the base, dragged heavy artillery through dense jungle mountains, and positioned it overlooking the valley. For 56 days, the French were bombarded from above and attacked from below. Over 9,000 French soldiers surrendered. France had no choice. They packed up and left Vietnam.
The 1954 Geneva Accords ended the French-Vietnam War, but planted the seeds of the next one. Vietnam was temporarily split at the 17th parallel: the Communist North under Ho Chi Minh, the Western-backed South under Emperor Bao Dai, later replaced by Prime Minister Ngo Dinh Diem. Nationwide elections were supposed to reunify the country by 1956. They never happened. Diem, backed by the United States, refused to hold the elections. He was certain Ho Chi Minh would win. And Ho Chi Minh was furious. He had fought for a unified Vietnam his entire life. Now, a puppet of the West was blocking it. Meanwhile, the United States was terrified. The Cold War was raging. China had fallen to communism in 1949. Korea had ended in a stalemate in 1953. President Eisenhower put a name to his fear: the domino theory. If Vietnam fell to communism, he warned, the rest of Southeast Asia would fall too, one country after another, like dominoes. So the U.S. began pouring money and military advisors into South Vietnam to prop up Diem's government. The problem? Diem was deeply unpopular. He was authoritarian, corrupt, and alienated the very people he needed on his side, particularly the Buddhist majority and rural farmers.
In December 1960, a guerrilla force called the National Liberation Front, better known as the Viet Cong, was formed in South Vietnam. On the surface, it looked like a homegrown rebellion against Diem. In reality, it was secretly directed by Ho Chi Minh and General Giap from Hanoi. They supplied the Viet Cong through the Ho Chi Minh Trail, a secret network of jungle roads running through Laos and Cambodia into South Vietnam. The Viet Cong used the same guerrilla playbook that had beaten France: ambushes, booby traps, blending with villagers, attacking and vanishing into the jungle. Diem's response: crackdowns, burning villages, imprisoning anyone suspected of being communist, only made him more hated and the Viet Cong more popular. By 1963, even the U.S. had had enough of Diem. With tacit American support, his own military officers staged a coup. Diem was captured and executed. President Kennedy was horrified. He hadn't expected that. And 3 weeks later, Kennedy himself was assassinated. The new president, Lyndon B. Johnson, had no patience for half measures. He believed fully in the domino theory and was determined to stop communism in Vietnam at any cost. In August 1964, U.S. Navy ships in the Gulf of Tonkin reported being attacked by North Vietnamese forces. The second attack, we now know, almost certainly never happened. But Johnson used it to get Congress to give him a blank check, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, authorizing full U.S. military involvement in Vietnam. America was now fully at war.
Johnson launched Operation Rolling Thunder in March 1965, a massive, relentless bombing campaign against North Vietnam that lasted over 3 years. The goal was to destroy supply lines, break morale, and force North Vietnam to the negotiation table. It failed. Ho Chi Minh rallied his people. They rebuilt bombed roads overnight. They moved operations underground into vast tunnel networks stretching for miles. The bombing killed over 100,000 people and destroyed hundreds of U.S. aircraft, but it didn't break North Vietnam. So Johnson sent ground troops. 500,000 American soldiers eventually deployed to Vietnam. Under General Westmoreland, they conducted search and destroy missions, helicopters dropping soldiers into jungles suspected of hiding Viet Cong fighters. The jungle was a nightmare. Rice paddies filled with leeches and booby traps. Dense forests where the enemy could disappear in seconds. Tunnels so deep and intricate that special soldiers called tunnel rats had to crawl inside with just a flashlight and a pistol, if they came out at all. No matter how many battles the U.S. won, the Viet Cong kept coming back. General Giap's strategy was simple: drag the war out until America got tired. And it was working. On January 30th, 1968, during Vietnam's most sacred holiday, Tet, the Lunar New Year, a ceasefire was supposed to be in effect. Instead, over 85,000 Viet Cong and North Vietnamese troops launched simultaneous surprise attacks on more than 100 cities across South Vietnam. They stormed the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. They seized the ancient city of Hue. Nowhere felt safe, not even the capital. Militarily, the Tet Offensive was a failure. The Viet Cong suffered catastrophic losses, over 45,000 fighters killed. The South Vietnamese government didn't collapse. But psychologically, it was a devastating blow to America.
For years, the U.S. government had been telling Americans they were winning. Tet proved that was a lie. Trusted CBS anchor Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, traveled to Vietnam himself, came back and told his viewers the war would end in stalemate. When LBJ heard that, he reportedly said, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America." Anti-war protests exploded across the country. By March 1968, Johnson's approval ratings had collapsed. He stunned the nation by announcing he would not seek re-election. The Tet Offensive had broken the will of the American public.
Richard Nixon took office in 1969, promising peace with honor. His strategy was called Vietnamization, gradually handing the war back to South Vietnam's own army, while withdrawing U.S. troops. But Nixon also secretly expanded the war, ordering massive bombing campaigns in Laos and Cambodia to cut off the Ho Chi Minh Trail. When this leaked, outrage erupted. At Kent State University in Ohio, National Guard troops opened fire on student protesters, killing 4 unarmed students. The country was tearing itself apart. Then came the Pentagon Papers, 7,000 pages of classified documents leaked by analyst Daniel Ellsberg, revealing that multiple presidents had systematically lied to the American people about the war. Whatever trust remained in the government evaporated. In January 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed. The U.S. agreed to withdraw all troops. A ceasefire was declared. American soldiers came home. But peace in Vietnam was an illusion.
With U.S. troops gone, North Vietnam saw its opening. In March 1975, General Giap launched the Ho Chi Minh Campaign, a massive final offensive against South Vietnam. City after city fell. The South Vietnamese army collapsed. The government panicked. South Vietnam's president resigned and fled the country. On April 29, 1975, North Vietnamese tanks rolled into Saigon. U.S. helicopters desperately airlifted the last Americans and allied Vietnamese off rooftops. On April 30th, South Vietnam surrendered unconditionally. Saigon had fallen. The war was over. Vietnam was reunified under communist rule. The domino had fallen, exactly as Eisenhower had feared.
The Vietnam War killed over 3 million people, most of them Vietnamese civilians caught in the crossfire. 58,000 American soldiers died. Hundreds of thousands more came home with PTSD, addiction, and wounds the country wasn't ready to help them heal. Vietnam itself was left devastated. Bombed cities, destroyed agriculture, and over 1 million refugees who fled by sea, risking everything to escape. The war permanently changed how America sees itself and its role in the world. It led to the War Powers Act, limiting a president's ability to send troops to war without Congress. It forced the military to rethink everything, from strategy to counterinsurgency to how it treats its veterans. And the lesson at the heart of it all? Military power alone cannot win a war where the people are not on your side. Ho Chi Minh understood that from the very beginning. It took America over 2 decades and 3 million lives to learn it. If this video gave you a new perspective on history, hit like and subscribe, and share it with someone who loves history as much as you do. Drop a comment below. What do you think was the single biggest mistake America made in Vietnam?